It was about learning to face my worst fears and then saying, but I'm still okay. And it was breaking it down to something very simple. Like if for today there's food on the table, we're safe, we have our health, we've got a roof over our heads, then we're good for today. Tomorrow will take care of itself. So it was really learning to trust that I couldn't control the outcome. Like I couldn't have control what happened to my mom. I couldn't control any of those circumstances. But it was just believing that for today, I've done everything I can and we're safe and we're healthy and we're fine. Tomorrow will take care of itself. Because if I thought too far in the future, I would get choked up or I would get, overwhelmed or I would be like, oh my God.
Hi, everyone. I would like to welcome Farah to today's episode, all the way from Dubai. Great to be chatting with you, Farah.
Thank you, Ellen. Thank you so much for having me on your show. Happy to be here.
Let's start with you telling us about your mum, as she was quite pivotal in your journey to discover yourself. So tell us a bit about some special memories that you have of her.
Thank you. My mother was sort of a child of 1947. She was born in India and India had just gained independence. So I think her year group, and it seems to be this common trait, they're full of this joy for life and living, and they want to live life large. And my mother especially was this very, very big personality, sort of larger than life and quite unconventional in how she chose to present herself to the world. So India, small town, 50, 60 years ago, my mother would walk around town in trousers. She trained as a lawyer. She would walk around in her sort of lawyer garb and chose trousers over a sari or more conventional attire, smoking her cigarette and, being rather colorful and taking on high profile cases to fight women's causes or fight for justice for the underdog, so to speak. And she just had this real love of anyone who was slightly left of center,
Yes.
anyone who was not mainstream. My mother would attract them to her and nurture that relationship almost. And she was just, I think, okay, maternal instincts may not have been at the front, but once I had got past my teen years and become an adult myself and found myself, we were more friends. And then it was an amazing relationship because then I'm not looking necessarily for mothering, but we're friends. And that was super fun to be with and be around. And she used to tease me a lot because possibly I'm a slightly more serious. I come from a more serious thinking, if you like. And mom would always tell me to lighten up and, find the joy in something or even find the humor in a tough situation. As she was getting older, when you asked about memories, I remember she was her hearing was getting selective, shall we say, and she would refuse to put on a hearing aid. But I remember coming home one evening and I'd come home late and gone out on a date and I know mom was staying up for me to come home. And I went to switch off the light and she was like, no, I need to hear you. So it was kind of a combination of hearing and lip reading. So she needed the light on so she could hear me properly. And it was that part of her that always brought joy and made me laugh.
Well, that's beautiful. And I know anybody who goes and looks at your website or indeed gets a book that you've written, they will see the beautiful photos of your mum. And you can just see how you've described her in that. She's just got this zest for life and larger than life and this great big beautiful smile that always seemed to be across her face. And she reminds me a lot of my girl, actually,
Right.
a little bit left field, breaking some of the rules and things like that, and not really worrying about what anybody else thought. And I just think, oh gosh, I often wish that I could be the free spirit like my daughter was. And I guess in some ways you probably thought that about your mum as well, didn't you?
Exactly. When I was younger, as a child, you want to fit in and conform. And I grew up in India. And I would say to my mom, if she could try when she was coming to a parent teacher meeting, put on something a little more traditional. And she was like, people are always going to talk. She
Yeah.
says you can't stop people talking any more than you can stop dogs barking. And that has stayed with me. And I feel, like you say, I wish I could have more of that free spirit part of her. But that voice is in the back of my head sometimes when I'm doing something. And if the thought comes, oh, what will they say? Or think, I remember mom says, you can't stop people talking. So I'm like, okay, it's fine. I just carry on, do what I believe is correct in my integrity, and hopefully it'll be the right choice that I make.
Yeah, that's such a good saying too. It's taken me all this time to reach that point as well, where I've stopped worrying about what people actually think. You know, as like you say, as long as you're doing the right thing or you have the best intentions at heart, then just be happy with that and don't worry about what anybody else thinks. Yes, such an important lesson to learn, I think. Now let's get a sense of who you are, because you yourself are a global citizen who goes across many cultures with your upbringing. And gosh, I think you wrote that. Now, let me just say that you are a Parsi being educated in a Catholic convent in a historic Muslim area wrapped in Hindu mythology. What a mix.
What a mouthful. But yeah,
Yep.
what a mix. So Parsis, where, for your listeners who may not know what a Parsi is, we're Zoroastrians by religion. And Parsi is the community of Zoroastrians who took asylum in India from Persia. So we came from a court called Pars, so we're called referenced or referred to as Parsis. So my parents are both Parsis, and that is traditionally, you can't convert to being a Parsi. You have to be born a Parsi. And it's one of the promises that the people, when they were granted asylum, they made to the king, that we would not convert people. We'll be like sugar and milk and we'll blend in. We won't seek people to convert people. So I'm a Parsi. My parents met. My mom was born in India. My dad was actually born in Johannesburg. They met in India. They got married. I was born in London. And then when I was 4,
See, like that sentence alone. But carry on.
Yeah. So when I was 4, my mom took me, or sent me rather, with a friend of hers to India to see my maternal grandmother. And the intention was we'd go for a month and, take out the cold, harsh winter of England and come back. But then as it happened, mom came to join me and we stayed there for the next 14 years, except no one told me. They forgot to let me know that we'd be staying on in India. So as a child in my head, I'm always like London's home, England's home. So that sense of displacement or belonging or just, being rooted was a challenge. It was something I had to overcome, and it came with time. And then the town where we were, it's Lucknow, which is very historic. The history books, you'll either hear mutiny or uprising, depending which side of the history you land. But we say it was the mutiny against the British in the town. It's a Muslim town. It was ruled by Nawab. And then India is a Hindu country. So you've got, even at school, we learn Hindi, which is the Hindu language or the language of India, if you like. And we had friends from all walks of life. And the school I went to was the same school my mother went to. So it was a convent run by the Christian nuns, and they'd come from Scotland or Ireland or, all over India as well. They were missionaries and they ran the English medium schools in Lucknow, and they were what would be the equivalent of a private school. So I went to the same school my mother went to. Some of the teachers who had taught her were still there. They taught me. And it was just this melting pot of experiences that as a child, I don't think you realize how that is shaping you and shaping your conditioning in a way to be aware of different thought processes or different beliefs or different religions and different cultures. And that sort of amalgamates and makes you who you are, so that I'm very comfortable with people from different religions because I hopefully have a base understanding of a number of them. I've lived in London and I'm as at home there as I am in India. And I've been in Dubai for the last 22 years, and that's been home. And I'm, very grateful to have called that my home. So it's been an interesting mix, and hopefully it stands me in good stead as I travel through life and straddle geographies.
Dubai itself is so multicultural as well,
Yes,
isn't
it
it?
is.
It's got people from all over.
Correct.
So, it's a bit of a melting pot. So you probably fit in very, very well there.
It is. Thank you. At Dubai, like one of the main questions people ask when you meet socially is, where are you from? Because we're all from different parts. And I always have to stop and think, okay, am I going for the long story or the short story? So I have to make a judgment call there.
Can completely understand that. Now, let's move on to your mum, because your mum had a shocking incident happen to her, which we're going to get into. Before we do that, you mention in your book, which you've written, which is, now correct me if I get this wrong, Mihir and Me. So,
Correct.
yes.
Yeah.
And you mentioned there that you would normally turn the ringer on your phone off as you were going to bed, except when your husband was away. And he happened to be away at that time. And so you had the phone on and you got that phone call coming through to you when you most needed to receive it. Now, I'm just going to digress a little bit here, because I had the exact opposite happen to me when my dad died. He was in and out of hospital all the time. And so I had a phone by my bed. And so I would always get these calls. But that particular night when he passed, for some unknown reason, and to this day, I still do not know how it happened, but the phone was unplugged. And so I didn't receive the calls from my stepmom and my stepsister saying, you need to come. This is probably it. And it was indeed. And I think to myself in hindsight, because I felt really bad about that, but I was very unwell at the time. And I actually think it was the universe looking after me, because I know that had I gone and spent the whole night up at the hospital, and the chances were I would have ended up there myself in hospital. So I just kind of thought, oh gosh, isn't it funny how the universe works for you? So let's go back to your mother. So now we've digressed a bit.
Yeah.
So her death was, as I mentioned, was
Mm.
very shocking
Mm.
and unexpected. Tell us about receiving that news and how it changed your life.
So as you mentioned, the phone ringer was on that night, which typically would have been off. And I remember being in a deep sleep, and I remember dreaming about mom. Like, it was very vivid. It was almost as if my head was in my mother's lap and she was reading to me. And it was the ring of the phone that pulled me out of that. And because she had been in my dream, and then the voice on the phone wasn't her, it was my stepfather. And he told me my mother had been shot, and it was a case of her being in the wrong place at the wrong time, and I had to get home. And as my husband at the time, now my ex-husband, he had traveled for work. So I had to wait for him to come back. He was out of town. So he had to take a flight back to Dubai to be with my children, our children who were quite young at the time, before I could leave. And I had to do the logistics of finding a flight to get me to Delhi. So my mother, the incident occurred in Lucknow, our hometown. The hospital wasn't equipped to deal with her injuries. So the doctors made the decision that she should be airlifted and brought to Delhi, which is the capital of India, where they could handle her injuries a bit better. And so I was going to fly into Delhi and needed to book a flight. And I worked in a bank, still work, but at that particular point, the bank I was working with, I needed to go in and let them know that I wouldn't be coming and just hand over my work, because the earliest flight I could get was late afternoon, which would allow time for my husband to get back as well. So it was a lot of logistics before I could get on the plane. And I remember at work, everyone was calling me because logic would say people don't survive a gunshot. But I had heard the news, but I don't think I believed my mother wouldn't survive. It was like my mother, this big, amazing, strong, powerful individual who I know would get through any challenge, right? She was not somebody who could be taken down. That's kind of the image that's in my head and my heart. And so I don't think I was ready to accept that she wouldn't survive. It was just a case of, okay, there's been an accident and I need to get to India and I need to get to my mother. I just knew I needed to get to her. But everyone who was around her, all the friends and family, feared that she may not last through the hours, through the night for sure, and were calling me repeatedly, you need to get here, you need to get here fast. And there was nothing with the best will in the world that I could do, because there was no flight till the one I had booked. Uh, so I got on the flight and got there. And it's only when you walk into the hospital and you see, the harrowed faces, you see the crumpled clothes, because as you said, people have been up all night in the hospital with her. You see people crying and then people coming to give you a hug as if to prepare you and steel you for what you're about to see. And then the whole process of walking to an ICU where you scrub up and you put on your gown and you put on the gloves and you put on the shoes and then you walk in. And then when you see your mother, strapped up to every apparatus and tube and machine known, that that's when your heart sinks, because you think, oh my God, the enormity of it probably hadn't hit me up until when I had the visual. Uh, and that is something that stays with you. That doesn't leave you, because that memory of that moment is something that I don't think you ever really get over. It's like time takes perhaps the sting out of it, but the memory stays. It's there with you.
Absolutely. That must have been such a anxious time for you, not being able to get to her straight away. I can't even imagine what that must have felt like. But your mum is, in fact, or was, in fact, a very, very strong lady, because she actually defied the odds, didn't she, for a time? So was it some? Go ahead.
You were going to say, she survived for 25 days. She was in hospital for 25 days and she came around, and they'd had to do a tracheotomy because she wasn't being able to breathe, because part of the injury had resulted in damage to her diaphragm and her lungs. But she was sitting up, she was signing to order her coffee. I was bringing her food. We were having sort of conversations, limited conversations through sign language, and the police came to interview her. And she was like, if the same thing happened again, I would do the same
Yeah.
thing. That was her spirit, still very alive and very strong in there. And she had all her faculties and was completely coherent for that duration while she was with
Yeah,
us.
gosh. And she was quite high profile too. So there was a lot of extra people on the scene. And how was that, trying to navigate all these extra people who, it's strange about death, isn't it? Because sometimes there are people around who want to claim a relationship with that person when in fact they didn't really have a relationship. I know that happened with my own daughter. And did you find the same thing happening with your mum?
For sure. Yeah, for sure. It's, as you say, I think death, and because it was such a sort of a tragic and unexpected event, and the press were all around and the media were all around, and it was high profile. It was a high profile case in its own right. And my mother, being that she comes from the strata of society that we do, and my stepfather's in politics, there was a lot of extra attention around the event and the incident. And there was just this, means just the sea of people. There were the reporters outside who couldn't enter, but inside there was family, there were friends, and there were people that were perhaps on the fringe who were now wanting to be super close to the incident. And as you say, claiming closer relationships than might be the actual fact of it. There were people posing to be immediate family and going and talking to the doctors because they wanted a first-hand
No
update.
kidding.
And that was just wild. It was really wild. And then there were well wishers. My mother was very spiritual. So, we were like, okay, get prayers said, or there was chanting going on, or, they were talking to priests outside. So there was a whole flurry of activity in the waiting area while mom was inside the ICU. But you see all shades of people, I think.
Yeah.
When you go through that, you see the good, the bad, the ugly. And I think you see the real side of people, be it whether you like it or find it distasteful. But I do think you do see humanity for all its shades of color at that particular point in time.
Yeah, I agree with you. And in your book, you also mentioned that you found it difficult that you would ask for your mum to be shot as part of the lessons you needed to learn, or, or part of the lessons that you needed to learn. Can you expand on that? Because this was something that your mum used to say, wasn't it?
So she always said to me, you choose when if I was complaining, and maybe complaining at her, I was like, something's not working, or she was being, herself. She would say, just remember you chose me as your mother, or just remember you chose this life, or you chose this lesson, you chose this incident. And I'm like, Mom, really, for sure I would not have. But she believed, and there is a theory, if you believe in life and afterlife, that you choose the life you're coming into. And if you believe in soul families and communities, that you will choose the roles you're going to play to teach each other the lessons that you need to navigate in this lifetime for the evolution of your soul. Right. So, one of the recurring themes for me that I find is about independence, or learning to be independent, or learning to be self sufficient, to be able to stand in my own skin, my own power, and not necessarily depend on other people, because each time I have, that's been a tough lesson for me to learn, because that reliance has not been seen through, so to speak, starting with the father figures. And then when this incident happened with Mom, I was like, surely this was not something we would have signed up for or agreed to for this life. Like, why in God's name would you choose to go through something, this heartbreaking, to learn what lesson? And even to this day, I'm like, I'm not quite sure what lesson I've learned from Mom's loss, other than to know how to deal with grief, or to see grief really up close and personal, right? To know what loss feels like, to know what your foundation being ripped out from under you feels like. If those were the lessons I was meant to learn, then they've definitely been learned. But you just wonder when you go through your life and you come across challenges, you're like, really? Did I choose that? What was I thinking? But I also do see the truth in it, because I don't know if I would be who I am today. I don't know if I would be sitting talking to you. I don't know if I would have had the message to share with your listeners through my own personal experience if I hadn't gone through that trial myself. So I only hope there's something in there that helps someone else.
I feel like it's a recurring theme when I'm speaking with people, that often the people I'm speaking with on my podcast have had quite difficult childhoods. They've had a lot of things that they've been confronted with and had to then overcome when they're an adult. And then they get through that, and then they then pass the lessons on to others. And I think in some way that is our role, that we're the ones that are given these enormous obstacles to overcome. And when we actually accept that and overcome them, we grow so much, and then we understand the bigger picture, and that enables us to then pass it on to others. Would you agree with that?
I would agree. I read something quite, it resonated with me. It said, you tell the story differently when you heal. So when you heal from the wound and you've processed your grief, you can share the story, because, as you say, if by me sharing my story, or you sharing yours, or your other guest sharing, there's somebody, one, two, three, anybody is touched or can take something from it that gives them some level of comfort, or a tool to be able to use for their own challenge in their life, then I think, okay, we've been able to pass that on, and maybe that was part of the lesson for us, and that was part of the reason for us to go through what we went through, to be able to pass it on and help others.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a hard one.
It is a hard one. And part of that was also you learning to trust, wasn't it? Trust yourself and trust tomorrow. Like, that really impacted on me, that you had to know that tomorrow was going to be okay before you could relax into today.
Yeah, so I went to a counselor, and one of the things, I do believe in seeking help where you need it, and I did need help to deal with the grief. I needed help. I got divorced subsequently. I definitely needed help there, because I didn't know how to navigate that. And it was about learning to face my worst fears and then saying, but I'm still okay. And it was breaking it down to something very simple. Like, if for today there's food on the table, we're safe, we have our health, we've got a roof over our heads, then we're good for today. Tomorrow will take care of itself. So it was really learning to trust that I couldn't control the outcome. Like I couldn't have controlled what happened to my mom. I couldn't control any of those circumstances. But it was just believing that for today, I've done everything I can and we're safe and we're healthy and we're fine. Tomorrow will take care of itself. Because if I thought too far in the future, I would get choked up or I would get, overwhelmed or I would be like, oh my God. But by breaking it down and just focusing on today, it allowed me to release the stress and the tension of A, trying to control an outcome that clearly we have no control over, and B, the worry of what tomorrow or day after or how would I manage. Just for today, can I manage? And then we'll be okay. So it was one day at a time, literally.
Yes, and I love that because, when you're taking one day at a time, you are living in the present moment. And then you get to enjoy this moment here and now. When you're
Correct.
worrying about the future or worrying about the past, things that you can't change, either direction, then you're missing out on what you've got right here in front of you. And yeah, that took me a while to learn as well. What I loved about your healing journey was that you then, after going through various modalities to help you with your grief, you then decided to look within. And when you started looking within, you turned to baking and yoga. So tell us about the role both of those took in your healing.
So, two very diametrically opposite, you might say. Yoga, I think, people will be more familiar with as a tool to harness the mind. For me, it was short practice. It's you're creating a pause in your mind from the chatter and everything, all the thoughts swirling around to just, it's sort of meditative. I use it as a moving mind. It's difficult to sit still and meditate, but yoga, anything moving, I find it easier to release my mind. So I started going, I'd always practiced yoga, but I started developing a stronger practice through the need to just get on the mat and release. It was the one place where I could release my emotions in a way as well, because the children are young or you're at work or, whatever, you're kind of holding it all together. But it was the one place I could just let it all go. The breath would lead you and the grief would flow through you in a way. Savasana, the tears would flow out. And as you're going through the practice, your body is getting stronger because it is a physical movement as well. And as your body is getting stronger, it gives you, I feel, a strength in your mind as well, that you feel, okay, I'm slightly more equipped to deal with whatever life's going to throw at me today. So yoga definitely helped me spiritually. It helped me balance my mind, but also gain strength in my body. It helped me harness the power of my thoughts and mind. I was learning how to still it. So if a negative thought pattern was rising up, I would be able to say, okay, I'm going to park you for today and deal with you when I think is the right time and not go into that sort of loop of negative thought pattern. Baking. So Parsis are known as foodies. The day is known to love food. We have breakfast, we're planning lunch. We have lunch, we're planning dinner. Food is just a huge part of Parsis, but also my family. And my grandmother was a great cook and my mom was a great cook. But baking was something, I've got a bit of a sweet tooth. My grandmother's lesson of do not leave anything on your dinner plate. So I didn't like to waste. So I wouldn't bake for myself a whole cake or a whole dessert because I only wanted a little bit. So I didn't really bake unless there were guests coming over for dinner. And then I was in London, I'd just been born. It was cold and grey outside. It was November and I was at home and the Sunday magazine that came with the paper carried these two recipes from Nigella Lawson. And I tried them and they were biscuits. And one of the tips that she said is you can make the dough and keep it in the fridge and whip up a fresh batch of biscuits whenever you want. And that really appealed to the side of me that likes to be super organized and not waste. I was like, okay, I can just make 6 biscuits and not waste and still have dough left over. So that got a lot of positive feedback, if you like. Everyone liked what I baked. And then I just kept trying. And I was at home on my maternity leave, so I could experiment and try different things. And that really fed my love of baking. And then when mom passed, come home from work and I'd enter the kitchen and I'd still be in my heels and what I was wearing from work. And I'd start just bringing out ingredients and wanting to create an Someone said to me that they say if you work with your hands, like gardening or stitching or art or anything, there are nerve endings in your hand that help you process things. So when I was talking about the
Oh,
baking, they said you were working with your hands. So I said, yeah, that's very true. And it literally would be this need in me to go in and just create something. And then you get the whiff of the cake or biscuits or whatever you're doing, that sort of is it's a really nice smell to have in the house. And then you friends and you see the smiles on their faces and you feel like you're bringing a bit of joy to them, which reflects back to you in a way. There was definitely an outlet. Like there was hiking going on for many, many months just to help me. And it was another place where my mind so focused on measuring the ingredients and the recipe. And you enter into a sort of a Zen zone that it was another way for me to process my thoughts.
I bet your family loved that you were in this baking frenzy. Yes.
They benefited.
Yeah, have some food.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, for me, it was gardening. I used to just put myself out into nature, ground, and just weed. That sense of just being out amongst the flowers and weeding and pruning and doing all of that, that gave me that real sense of zen, just stilling myself. And yeah, yes, love that.
It's when you say nature, whenever something bad has happened or whatever, I'm walking and I say the sun still rises, the moon still comes up in the evening, the flowers still come out, the trees still shed. Nature, it's that cycle of life that just keeps going on. It's we humans, we get so caught up, rightly so when you've lost a loved one. But I just feel like I look at nature and I think, wow, there's something to be learned there.
Yeah. So, when did you decide to write your book? Was the book always in you, or?
I think it was always there. I think the heart of the story, mom's story, I think that flowed out first. That sort of just literally sitting, typing. I'd always journal. So I had journals of my time, but it was more, what happened, things that had occurred through the day, less about my emotional journey of that time. But then when I was going for grief counseling, the counselor would ask me to write, how did you feel? Right? Get me to go deeper and deeper and, try and bring the emotion through. Then one day I was just sitting and the words started coming and bubbling up and I just typed them. And so the heart of the story came first and then the rest sort of I filled in around it to build the journey, to tell the story from the start, if you like, of who she was to how it all ended. And it was a story that sat there for a while. I edited it, I worked with people, refined it, had to find the right way. And I think life is about timing. When the time is right, the people appear to help me through. And I guess the time is right, and the people appear to help me on the journey. And here I am telling the story.
Were you surprised at any stage by emotions that came up through that process that you thought perhaps you'd already dealt with those and then, hello?
Yeah, yeah, correct. It means even now, there's certain passages, if I read, I will well up through the editing. I'd have to steal. Like there was a lot of tissue boxes that got
Yeah.
used
Yeah.
for a
Yep.
lot of it. But I think it's very cathartic in a way to write about it. And even my childhood, which wasn't be able to articulate it and just put it out there and shine a light on it in a way. I think it whole way, if it's sort of hidden away and it can't be talked about and it's this taboo thing that carries the shame with it. And I'm just like, it's out there. When I was publishing, my uncle, my mom's brother, said to me, are you sure you want to put this particular part in? I was like, either I am honest and truthful about the story, or if I start editing and cutting bits out, then, even the reader's going to say, you've shortchanged me. And this, they can sense if something's missing. And I just felt, and again, it's back to you sit with yourself and you think, am I doing the right thing? Am I being honest? Am I acting with integrity? And is this truthful, right? Without meaning to hurt anyone, but this is my truth that I am sharing. So yeah, it was hard, but hopefully I can tell the story now without the sting and without the emotion.
I certainly valued you speaking from your heart and being vulnerable in that, because there were passages I read of you and in your childhood, straight back to my childhood, because you and I seem to be very similar personalities.
There's a reason
Isolation
why,
and standing back. And, I remember my family always saying to me, "Oh, Alice, stop being so sulky. Why are you sulking?" All the
Oh,
time. And I'm going, "I'm not. I'm just," it was just like how I reacted to what was going on around me. And oh my gosh. So I really valued that, because I think, yes, that's honoring who we are and what we went through from our perspectives. And yes, yes. So I thank you for doing that and allowing yourself to be so vulnerable, because yes, when you put a book out, family can come in and they can be very judgmental about what you've written, because their perception of the same situation can be completely different. But it's
correct.
not them writing the book, it's you writing the book. So,
Yeah. True. I'm glad it's out, and I hope it resonates and touches people and helps people
yeah,
along the way.
yes. You write in the beginning of your book about the struggles that teach us to develop our emotional strength through what we experience and how we discover our tools along the way. So, that I felt again is a really important thing for people to understand and identify with, because we're not going to use all the same set of tools for the exact same situation we may go through. So, can you just elaborate on that a bit more?
Sure. The way I look at it, like if we go back to our belief that we choose lessons or we choose this life for the lessons, right? So everyone's going to have a version of a challenge, right? We've experienced grief. Somebody may have financial, somebody may have relationships, somebody may have, health issues. So the challenge is always going to be there. The the things that I find have helped is to be able to seek help, to understand and channel the emotion that's coming through, or to address the emotion that's coming through, to be able to deal with it. I think movement, any kind. So I've chosen yoga. Somebody else might want swimming. Somebody else might love dancing. Somebody else might like walking or hiking. But I feel if allowing the breath to move, you're allowing the emotions to move rather than stagnate and grip you inside. So, and it also means the whole bit about the endorphins that kick in and I find movement of any kind that appeals to you will help along the way in whatever situation you find yourself. And it goes back to if you strengthen your body, you'll find the strength in your mind as well to be able to deal with the challenge you're facing. I chose baking. You love gardening. There's going to be something that everyone else loves. You might love music. You might love reading. Like whatever it is that gives you joy, I would practice that gratitude. A huge believer
Oh,
in saying thank you for everything I have today and everything I will receive in the future. And it's back to for today, super grateful. There's a meal on the table, or my kids are safe, or we have our health, or, got a roof over our head, whatever. And even when I'm facing something particularly tricky or challenging, I force myself to take a minute and just say thank you for all the good. And when I say thank you for the good, you find yourself in a way relaxing into all that's good. And the one thing that is causing the grief, you can get a perspective on it because it's not the biggest thing that is upsetting you at the time, right? There's so much to be thankful for.
yeah.
But we can sometimes focus on, the lack of rather than the abundance that already exists. So that I believe really helped me for sure. And I wrote my dreams. I would say thank you. And I would have a long list of things I wanted to accomplish or achieve or work towards. And they're dreams, but dreams with actions as well, right? To help them mobilize and send your intentions to the universe, but show the universe you're serious about it. Then it will have your back and help you through. That's kind of what I believe. And everyone will take from it and use what resonates and works for them. And everyone's going to be different. But those would be the things. And trust and allow time. My brother says something. He's a very different personality to me, but he'll say, give time, time. And I'm like, Shiraz, I'm super impatient. I'm like, I don't have the time. But there's a truth in that, things like grief need time. It's not like you will ever stop missing the person you lose or you will ever stop wanting to be with that person, but you find a way to operate without that sort of grief gripping and overtaking every other aspect of your life, right? So time as a healer, which I think everyone would have heard, time heals. Not so much heals, but gets you to a place where you can operate for the most part. There will still be good days, bad days, good thoughts, not great thoughts. For the most part, you can function and things will turn a corner.
Those are really great suggestions that you've given there, Farah. And I know gratitude. I didn't grow up in a family that really expressed a lot of gratitude, so that wasn't my go-to. And after losing Tal, I then began to say, what am I grateful for? And especially about the 18 years I had her, and it changed my whole way I felt, the whole way I thought about things. And it was so life changing for me. I just kept doing it. And today, like you, that would be my biggest go to, especially if I'm in a tough situation that I'm not always sure how I'm going to handle it. And then I would just take that step back and just say, okay, what am I grateful for here and now? And then it opens up, doesn't it? It seems to open up the ether to supply, to give you the solution. Yeah, it buzzes me out how it does.
Yeah, but you're
yes.
right. Yeah, it's almost when you release the thought and give it up to a higher power to help you, you're allowing it to come to you, and it does come. And sometimes if I'm, struggling with something and I can't find a solution before I go to bed, I'm like, please guide me to whatever it is I need and just release it up to the universe and let it come to you.
And the universe always says it, life shouldn't be hard. If you leave it to us, we'll make it real easy for you. But the trouble is, we tend to get into it in our own way and make it a lot more difficult than perhaps it needs to be. Now, you also have a beautiful Parsi saying that encapsulates what you've just spoken about. Would you mind sharing that with us?
Sure. So in our ancient language, the words are Humata, Hukata, Huvarashta, and it's good thoughts, good words, and good deeds. And it's about being in alignment, right? So your thoughts and your words and your deeds all flow through. You act in that integrity of yourself. And the minute anything is out of alignment, you know within you that something's off. So it's about trying to stay positive and recognizing the power of your mind. And then what you say, you're giving life to those thoughts and you're giving air and oxygen to the words that are being spoken and heard. And words then lead to your actions and your actions lead to your habits and, et cetera, et cetera. So it's start with good thoughts, good words, good deeds, and allow that to be your guiding force for life.
And definitely in the times we are living in now, where it's easy to get sucked up into the things that are not perhaps very positive at all. And I think that we have to own, each and every one of us, the way that we think and how we choose to act in our days. And I believe, like when I say just concentrate on you and what you're putting out, and if you're putting out kindness into the world, then that's what you're going to get back. And if you're putting out kind words and good deeds, then gosh, they just multiply, don't they? So
They do.
I think the more of us that can do that, yeah, get this planet, hopefully, that we really all enjoy being. Okay, what would you say has been the biggest learning for you out of this experience with you?
I think there's been so much, there's been quite a bit of time that's elapsed, right, since my mother's passed. So she passed in 2006. And over the time, and I think not just mom passing, but even my childhood and the gentleman figures in my life who haven't necessarily been there. I think for me to be comfortable with who I am, and that not necessarily free spirit, but to be happy with who I am, to embrace life. Like mom's legacy for me is very much about embracing life, enjoying myself, not having to diminish my light for fear of somebody else not being able to handle it, right? To not worry if something's a little bit left off center and to enjoy that imperfection, if you like, and to not look for the perfection of things to be exactly the same. She gave me, I think, my spirituality. That came from my mom. She was very spiritual. She would say her prayers every day. And I think that belief and that trust and that faith came from her. So, yeah. And I think just the whole experience of losing her makes you, I think, a little bit more empathetic because you realize it's such an equalizer. You realize none of us are exempt, right? We're all going to have something slam us, and we're all just doing the best we can with the tools we have. And you just try and do that and follow through every day.
Yes. Yeah. And it's so freeing when you reach that stage, isn't it? When you can just be content with who you are, when you look in the mirror and you go, actually, I really like that person reflected back at me. And that's really a nice feeling. It took me a long time to be able to look in the mirror and like who I was. And so I sense the same thing about you as well. And your mum was only 56, wasn't she, when she was shot? So she still had a lot of life left in her. So she was tragically taken, far too young. So I think that is sobering in the respect that we have to make the most of the here and now that we have because none of us know what is around that corner.
Correct. Correct. And we all sort of are busy making life plans and then sort of life hits us. I think just try and do the best you can each day. Be grateful for what you have. Dream big,
Yeah.
dream those audacious dreams. There's no limit on the dream, and then take steps towards making that dream a reality.
Yes. Yes. And how would you describe yourself today?
Oh, that I sort of jokingly say I'm the baking banker slash yogi. But I'd like to say, I'd like to think, I'd like to think I am somebody who understands people. I come from a point of view of life experience that I can share, I can empathize. Um, I have enough experience to be able to give back to people. Hopefully, people think the same, and I hope that it resonates with your listeners as well.
I hope so too. Are you any closer to opening up your own cafe?
Yeah, so that's one of the dreams that gets written, and we need to take steps to. So it's definitely there. It's definitely in the ether. It's going to come to.
Oh, I look forward to hearing when that happens. Okay, we're going to finish up with the few questions that I always ask. And the first is, what is the best thing that has happened to you so far today?
My morning cup of coffee and yoga
Oh,
on the mat. So yeah, means the little things, coffee, a yoga class, best thing that's happened this morning.
and something that you are most grateful for.
My children, most grateful for the human beings they are, the spirits they are, and for them coming to me.
When you have moments in your day that are not going quite to plan, how do you pivot out of those when it all turns to custard?
Um, Either I look for the closest, quickest yoga class I can get to,
Hmm.
or if I'm in the office, for example, or work, I'll take out my journal and I'll start just writing my gratitudes. What I'm grateful for, I'll just take a couple of minutes to just rebalance my energy a little bit because I can pivot my focus to something that's grateful. I'm grateful for.
Sounds great. So, we're going to have all your bio details and how people can get a hold of you in the episode's notes. along with, and now we have to tell them this because this is a real incentive to go and visit your website. You have 3 beautiful, yummy looking recipes on your website.
Yeah, in lieu of the
Yeah.
cafe, they could get early tasters.
Yeah. Absolutely. Plus a great reading list of books that really helped you and a couple of meditations from Deepak Chopra. So definitely we'll have those links in the episode notes. What final thoughts would you like to leave our listeners with today, Farah?
So I'd probably go back to the fact that we're all going to have a challenge come into our life in any way, shape, or form, right? When it comes, maybe don't try and go it alone. Get the help, get the support, whether it's friends, family, the network, whatever works for them, whether they want to seek professional help. I would definitely advocate for it. It helped me greatly. Exercise or moving the body, as we spoke about, whatever form, resonates with them. But I would highly encourage that. It really makes a difference when you feel your body sort of flowing and moving and getting stronger through whatever activity you do. It helps. It helps with the mindset as well at the time. And I would say remain grateful for all that's good and allow time to pass with whatever the challenge is. And hopefully, when you look back with the passage of time, you'll appreciate and understand that you have come that and become a stronger version of yourself. You've learned a lesson that will stand you in good stead, and hopefully, you may be able to help someone else down the road with that lesson that you've learned. A little bit of allow time to pass over whatever is the challenge of the moment.
Those are great takeaways. Thank you very much, Farah. And I couldn't have asked for a better way to spend this hour than connecting with you. I really, enjoy is not the right word, but I got a lot out of reading the book that you wrote about your mum and yourself. That was a real treasured journey for me. The photos in there just speak to all the things that you've spoken about and more. They bring it to life. And it's lovely having photos, actually. I think more people should do that in their books. And the healing journey that you've been through, you went through such a tragic event that robbed you of your mom at such a young age. And I think sharing this with others is so they can learn from your experiences is a wonderful thing for you to be doing. And I'm very grateful for the time you've spent today with her.
Thank you, Ellen. Really appreciate it. And I hope your listeners enjoy our conversation.
Thanks for listening. I hope you got some real value from this episode. If there's a topic you'd like covered, click on the Beautiful Side of Grief at gmail.com link, or go into the beautifulsideofgrief.com website, where you can also leave a review. To get notified of new episodes, hit the subscribe button. And if you know of somebody who could benefit from this episode, please share. And until next time, please be kind to you and take good care.